All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on navigating Wisconsin's new LLC Act. As you may know, there are some big changes on the horizon for Wisconsin limited liability companies. On January 1st, 2023, Wisconsin will have a new uniform limited liability company law applicable to all LLCs. We know that a lot of our members are LLCs, and we wanted to sort of condense and synthesize this critical information for you. So we're pleased to have Jason Buckner from Nowlan Law on the webinar here today to talk to us about some of these changes. And we want to thank Nowlan for their sponsorship and presenting this webinar to us. For more than 130 years, Nowlan Law has been Rock County's premier law firm and the first choice of individuals, businesses, and municipalities for legal services. So we thank them for their support of this webinar series. So before I turn it over to Jason, just want to go over some ground rules. Don't feel bad if I go through and mute you. We want to make sure that we are able to hear our presenter, so don't take it personally if I come through and mute you. I'll play whack-a-mole here and make sure that we're able to hear Jason. So with that, Jason, I'd love to turn it over to you and take us through some of the finer points of the law.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Dan. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I had a little bit of trouble here at the beginning, but I think we're all worked out. We've been going over this change for some time here, and it is sweeping. The whole law has been repealed and restated for LLCs, and we've kind of tried to pick out some of the important points for most people and convey those to you in this presentation. I know there was another longer presentation that was offered to everybody, but I understand also not everybody wants to sit through an hour-and-a-half presentation. So with that, I think for us, the first major point is that this is effective January 1st, 2023. And there's basically three things you can do about that before that date. You can opt into the new law, which is just the filing of a form with DFI prior to January 1. You can opt out of the new law and have the current law applied to you and your LLC, or you can do nothing. We don't recommend doing nothing to most people. And for many of our clients that are multi-member or manager-managed LLCs, we have been recommending that they opt out, especially if you have an operating agreement that you've put some time and thought into, because some of the changes of this new law will require, amending or restating that operating agreement. So with that, getting into what the changes to the operating agreements are going to be, if you are an entity without an operating agreement, under the current law, you would just default back to the statutes. Under the new law, you will automatically be considered to have an operating agreement. And the way that they apply this or they make this work is that if there were to be a disagreement, and say there was a court involved or something like that, an entity that didn't have a written operating agreement, which is a new definition this year, could have its operating agreement derived or implied by things like conversations, emails, tax returns, anything the court wanted to use to try to show how you were operating as an LLC. So having a written operating agreement is much more of an advantage after January 1, because you get to determine your management structure. For those of our clients that are manager, have multi-members, and do have an operating agreement, that's another reason to opt out, is often entities will waive the fiduciary duties that they are required to manage under. And the provisions that we drafted under the current law just won't be effective against the imposition of these fiduciary duties under the new law. The new law has codified the duty of loyalty and the duty of care. And I won't get too deep into what those mean, but anymore, under the new statute, you're going to be required to specifically eliminate or alter those fiduciary duties if that's something you want for your business. To us, that's the most major change we're seeing, and the one that most people want to consider, and the main reason why we've recommended again that those clients opt out of the new law. Some other changes are administrative changes. Differences in how you'll report to DFI or file things with DFI. One of the one that will affect the most entities is regarding annual reports. It's going to be a requirement now for new LLCs that file articles of organization to include an email address for their registered agent. It's also going to be a requirement to include that email address in annual reports after January 1. The reason for that is DFI is going to start sending out the reminders for annual reports electronically. So if you don't have the ability to receive that, or that information is not current, there is a possibility you could miss, the reminder for the annual report filing requirement, which could, if that deadline passed and it was just forgotten, which it does happen from time to time, then the LLC can be administratively dissolved. And the downfall or the downside to that is that you could end up with personal liability where you didn't think you would have that before. You would not be able to sue on behalf of your company, so things like collections or anything like that would be difficult. And you could end up in a position where you would have voidable actions, or if you took actions as the entity and it was in fact administratively dissolved, those may not be enforceable. Another change, probably, and I'm trying to go down the line here, and what may be what I think is less important as I get down the line here for most people. Another change is that a member is no longer required to contribute economically to become a member. That was written in to accommodate some business practices, but it also would allow LLCs to be used for 501c3s now, where a member could be granted a membership and not have to make a contribution. Additionally, if you have an organization that you want to be manager managed, you have to state that in writing in your operating agreement. So if you're a manager managed organization, if you're creating one after the new year, or you're one now and you want to opt into the new law, you want to have that in your operating agreement, because you are no longer required to identify your management structure in your articles of organization. That may simplify some things for people. Then you don't have to amend your articles of organization if you do change your management structure. We would say that if you are going to be manager managed, best practice is probably to also note that in your articles as well. But it has to be noted in writing in your operating agreement. So that would be one reason to opt out of the new law. And with that, I think I've hit the major points I wanted to hit. I can take questions now if anybody has them. Or...
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, and thanks for logging on to the webinar again to give us this valuable information. A couple of questions have come in since we got started here. First one I think is a good one. What is the benefit of this new law? Why did this come about? Why the change now?
So this is something that's been in the works for a long time. There's an organization that's developed a uniform limited liability corporation law, and I believe 26 or 27 states have opted into that now. And really it's an effort to homogenize the law amongst the states so that when one company is working with another, or when a foreign LLC goes into another jurisdiction, they're operating under familiar rules. The other thing that's beneficial would be there's going to be much more law that's been considered when states are using a similar or a uniform law. So if you look at Wisconsin right now, there really isn't a whole lot of court law or court decisions about LLCs and the way they operate. So when you expand that area to other jurisdictions that are using similar law, then sometimes they'll take into consideration the way that courts in those jurisdictions have viewed issues that come up.
So Jason, this one's come in a couple of times now. What do you do to opt out?
So there is a form that the DFI has on their website called the Statement of Non-Applicability. This form, I believe it's Form 398 and Form 598, but there's a link to it on their website. It's not a long form. I believe that there's not a filing fee either. But it's a form that could be used for either an LLC or an LP to opt out of the new laws. And you fill it out with the information. I think it's the entity name and then the name of the title of whoever's authorized to sign. One thing I would point out is that if you were to sign a statement of non-applicability, you'd also want to make sure that you have a consent resolution to have on file or to have in your minute book. And then one thing to keep in mind as well is that making the decision to opt out has to be voted in by as many people as it would take to amend your operating agreement. So the default right now would be a majority, but there are some entities that write in a supermajority or a unanimous requirement for making those kind of decisions to amend your operating agreement.
Thank you, Jason. One other question that's come in is what would you recommend for a single member LLC without an operating agreement?
I think for a single member LLC, and we have been giving similar advice to LLCs that where the members are married or close relatives. It may not change that much for you going into the new law. You know, a lot of these, the really big issue with the fiduciary changes or the changes to the fiduciary duties are that interaction between members or interaction between managers and members. So if you're an individual and you're a sole member LLC, I don't think it's as critical. Again, it also would depend on your comfort level with everything. If you have been operating, under certain structure or using certain methods from the old law that you're really comfortable with, then you want to opt out. If not, you may not really see that big of a change. The big thing for us is that if you do feel like maybe there's a possibility that you should opt out, this is the only deadline. The January 1 deadline is the only deadline for this. After the January 1 deadline, you can always opt into the new law if you want, but you can't opt out of the new law after January 1. So.
Jason, I hate to put you on the spot, but here we go. Is it possible, I know we're multitasking, we're all used to this, but is it possible for you to get maybe a link to that opt-out form and then maybe put it in the chat window? I think a lot of people are certainly asking for that at this point. So
sure.
While Jason's doing that, I would encourage anybody that has a question to go ahead and put it into the chat function. You can either direct message it to me or just put it to the whole chat. We're good either way. So if you have a question for Jason, please go ahead and put it into the chat function there. And again, we're going to work on getting that link to you put in the chat so you can have that at the ready and act here in the next couple of weeks if you feel the need to do so. So are there any questions from the audience at this point? You don't put it in the chat, you can just unmute yourself and shout it out. Okay, sit tight here while we collect questions here. So you see Jason's got that link there in the chat. So please go ahead and grab that link from the chat. Go ahead and do that now. And while we're thinking about all this, you know, as always, Forward Janesville recommends you follow up with your legal and business advisors if you have questions about this stuff. They're the experts, not necessarily us. We're the conveners, right? We bring people like Jason and the Nowlan firm to the table to give the information to you. So Jason sent me the link, so let me put it in the chat for everyone here. Hang on one second here. Everyone in meeting. Okay, so Jason sent me that, and I'm just gonna do the work real quick here and format 98398. Okay, sorry about that. The chat, the link should be up for everyone at this point. So please do grab that link. Again, form 398598. We're good to go. So are there any additional questions? Otherwise, we're going to give you back about 15 minutes in your lunch hour here. Nice and efficient. That's the way we like to do it. Jason, again, thank you so much for agreeing to pop on here and give our members this information. I think it's super valuable to do so, and very timely as well. Again, we're gonna if you haven't grabbed that link out of the chat, please do so now because we're getting ready to be done here. But if you do have any questions, please contact me directly at danc@forwardjanesville.com. Dan Cunningham, again, Vice President, Government Relations and Education here at Forward Janesville, and I can get you this information. But again, we've recorded this webinar, so it'll be available for you here later today. So please do share that out with friends and colleagues. So unless there's anything else, Jason, thank you again. Appreciated everything.
Sure, thank you.
And hope everybody has a great holiday season. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see you in 2023. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.